Welcome to our channel, where we bring you the most inspiring and life-changing stories from history. Today, you are about to hear a tale that is not just about financial success. It is a story about struggle, unbearable pain, fierce determination, and the absolute power of never giving up. This is the story of a young boy who had nothing, not a single penny in his pocket, not a comfortable home, not even enough food to survive the week. He was a boy who lost everything at a fragile age, who faced starvation, crushing loneliness, and endless hardships. But that boy refused to accept his fate. He walked for 2 agonizing years, covering a brutal distance of 470 kilometers. He had no money, no map, and no shelter. He faced freezing storms and physical exhaustion, but he never stopped walking. That homeless, starving boy eventually became the founder of the world's most powerful luxury brand, Louis Vuitton. How did he do it? How did a boy sleeping on the streets turn his pain into power and his struggles into a billion-dollar empire? Every single detail in this story is true. And if you watch until the very end, you won't just hear an incredible story, you will learn powerful life lessons and naturally improve your English through engaging storytelling and rich vocabulary. Let's begin at the very start. In the year 1821, in a tiny, freezing village called Anchay in eastern France, a baby boy was born into a deeply impoverished family. His name was Louis Vuitton. Life did not welcome young Louis with comfort or wealth. From the moment he took his first breath, he was surrounded by brutal hardship. His father, Xavier Vuitton, was a local farmer and carpenter, a hard-working man who spent his days building heavy furniture and small wooden structures just to survive. His mother, Coronne Gaillard, was a milliner, sewing hats for the village women. They worked from sunrise to midnight, yet their meager earnings were barely enough to put bread on the table. Louis grew up in a fragile wooden cabin with a leaking roof and damp, freezing floors. Winters in Anchay were merciless. Thick snow buried the village for months, and icy winds cut through their thin clothes. There was no indoor heating, no warm woolen blankets, and certainly no comfortable bed. At a very young age, Louis learned a harsh truth: life is not fair. He didn't have wooden toys like the wealthy children. He didn't go to school. Instead, his childhood was spent covered in sawdust, helping his father carry heavy wooden planks and hammering rusted nails. His hands grew rough and calloused. His clothes were nothing but ragged patches, and his stomach was almost always empty. The spark of curiosity. But Louis was different from the other boys in his village. Even though his pockets were empty, his mind was full of something far more valuable: a dream. Every week, wealthy travelers and merchants passed through his small village. Louis would hide behind the trees, watching these aristocrats dressed in fine silk, carrying massive, beautifully crafted wooden travel trunks. He watched them with wide-eyed fascination. Where were they going? What did the world outside this frozen village look like? Who built those magnificent trunks? He was hungry for knowledge and desperate for a better life. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. The ultimate tragedy. When Louis was just 10 years old, a devastating tragedy struck. His mother fell severely ill. In their poor village, there were no hospitals, no medicine, and no doctors to save her. Day by day, her breathing grew shallower. One cold morning, as the sun barely peeked over the hills, Louis's mother took her last breath. Standing by her dirt grave, 10-year-old Louis was completely silent. He was too broken to even cry. His world had entirely collapsed. His father, shattered by grief, grew distant, cold, and eventually remarried a wicked stepmother who treated Louis terribly. For the first time in his life, Louis felt completely, terrifyingly alone. But in that dark abyss of pain, he made a life-altering decision. He would not stay in this village to rot. He would not accept a life of poverty and abuse. He would leave. But how? At the age of 13, Louis made his escape. He had no money, no horse, and barely any food. His destination? Paris, the glittering city of dreams. But Paris was 470 kilometers away. For a starving child on foot, it was a suicide mission. One evening, as the village fell asleep, Louis packed a tiny cloth bag. He didn't tell his father. He didn't say goodbye. Before the sun rose, he took his first step on the dirt road leading to the capital. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one absolute truth: he could not stop. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to keep moving forward, even when you have no idea where you are going. He walked for hours, which turned into days, and then into agonizing weeks. His shoes wore thin, leaving his feet blistered and bleeding. Survival tactics. To survive, Louis worked odd jobs in random villages. He washed dishes, swept stables, and worked as a farmhand. Payment. He wasn't paid in money. He was paid in scraps of bread and a dry place to sleep in the hay. When he couldn't find work, he slept in the muddy forests, using his tiny bag as a pillow, shivering as the winter winds burned his skin. He was exhausted. He was starving, but his determination was unbreakable. Arrival in the City of Light. After 2 full years of walking, struggling, and surviving purely on willpower, 15-year-old Louis Vuitton finally arrived in Paris. But Paris was not the magical wonderland he had imagined. It was a chaotic, massive beast of a city. The streets were filled with rushing horse-drawn carriages, wealthy aristocrats smelling of expensive perfume, and markets overflowing with golden pastries. But there was a dark side. The alleyways were packed with beggars, thieves, and desperate orphans. Paris was a cruel place that chewed up the poor and spat them out. And Louis? He had absolutely nothing. His first night in Paris was his lowest point. He found an abandoned wooden cart behind a bakery, crawled inside to hide from the massive city rats, and cried himself to sleep. The next morning, the smell of fresh croissants twisted his empty stomach into knots. He needed a job. Desperately. He walked from shop to shop, begging for work. No experience. No connections. Get lost, boy. Days passed. He ate rotten scraps from the cobblestone streets. He was on the verge of collapsing. But then, fate finally intervened. One evening, Louis saw a struggling older man trying to lift a massive, heavy travel trunk into a workshop. Without hesitating, Louis ran over, grabbed the other handle, and helped the man carry it inside. The shop was mesmerizing. Walls were lined with leather-bound trunks, brass locks, and golden initials. It was the workshop of Monsieur Maréchal, one of the finest trunk makers in Paris. Maréchal looked at the dirty, skinny teenager. "You're strong for your size. What do you want?" Louis looked him dead in the eye. "I want to work. I will work harder than anyone else in this city." Maréchal chuckled at the boy's audacity. "Fine, you start tomorrow. You sweep the floors, no pay. If you're good, we'll talk." The master craftsman. For months, Louis did the grueling grunt work. He swept sawdust, fetched heavy tools, and organized nails. But he was doing something else, too. He was watching. After the other workers went home, Louis would stay by candlelight, picking up discarded scraps of wood and leather. He practiced hammering. He practiced stitching. He imitated the master craftsman. One morning, Maréchal found a beautifully stitched mini trunk on a workbench. He was stunned. He realized this street boy was a prodigy. From that day on, Maréchal personally trained him. By the time Louis was 30 years old, he was no longer a beggar. He was the most requested craftsman in Paris. The wealthy elite specifically asked for him. "I want my trunk made by Vuitton," they would say. But his ultimate breakthrough came from the highest power in the country, Empress Eugénie. One afternoon, the doors of the workshop flew open. In walked Empress Eugénie, the wife of Napoleon III, the ruler of France. She was draped in silk and diamonds, unimpressed by the standard trunks on the walls. She looked directly at Louis. "I travel constantly. My clothes get ruined. These traditional trunks are too heavy and completely impractical. I need something no one has ever seen before. This was a make-or-break moment. In the 1850s, all travel trunks had rounded, dome-shaped tops so rain would run off them. But because they were rounded, you couldn't stack them on trains or ships. They were incredibly inefficient. Louis took a massive risk. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "what if I build you a trunk that is completely flat on top so it can be stacked? And instead of heavy leather, I will cover it in a waterproof canvas. It will be lighter, more elegant, and utterly indestructible." The room went dead silent. No one challenged traditional trunk design, but the Empress smiled. "Do it, Vuitton. Impress me." Louis worked like a madman. He used lightweight poplar wood for the frame. He invented a tightly woven, waterproof gray fabric called Trianon canvas. When he presented the flat-top trunk to the Empress, she was speechless. It was a masterpiece of modern engineering and high fashion. She immediately named Louis Vuitton her personal, official trunk maker. Overnight, Louis Vuitton became the most famous name among the French aristocracy. With the backing of the Empress, Louis had outgrown Maréchal's shop. He took his life savings, roughly the equivalent of $1,000 today, and opened his very own workshop in 1854. He hung a simple wooden sign above the door: Louis Vuitton, Maletier, trunk maker. The boy who once slept in a wooden cart now owned a business in the heart of Paris. But the universe wasn't done testing him. Just as his business was booming, disaster struck. The Franco-Prussian War erupted in 1870. Paris was besieged. Artillery shells rained down on the city. The wealthy aristocrats fled for their lives. Food was so scarce that people were eating rats from the sewers. Louis's business completely collapsed. His beautiful workshop outside Paris was looted and destroyed by soldiers. His tools were stolen. At 50 years old, Louis Vuitton had lost everything. Again, the phoenix rises. Most men would have given up, but Louis remembered the 470-kilometer walk. He remembered the freezing forests. He knew how to survive. When the war ended, Louis didn't just rebuild his shop, he upgraded it. He moved to an even more luxurious location in Paris. The post-war era brought a boom in train and ocean liner travel, and the newly wealthy elite needed luggage. Louis worked tirelessly, expanding his designs and cementing his brand as the ultimate symbol of high-status travel. He also married a supportive woman, Clémence Émilie, and together they had a son named Georges Vuitton. Georges would soon prove to be the key to turning a successful Parisian shop into a global phenomenon. In 1892, at the age of 70, the boy who walked barefoot to Paris closed his eyes for the last time. Louis Vuitton passed away, leaving his legacy in the hands of his ambitious son, Georges. Before he died, Louis gave Georges a strict philosophy that the brand follows to this day: never sell cheap, never mass produce, always remain exclusive. Georges was a marketing genius. He took his father's French company and introduced it to the world, taking the trunks to the World's Fair in Chicago. But massive success brought a massive problem: counterfeits. Because Vuitton trunks were so popular, cheap copycats began flooding the market. Georges knew he had to protect his father's legacy. He needed a design so complex and unique that lazy thieves couldn't replicate it. In 1896, Georges designed a pattern featuring interlocking letters, diamonds, and four-leaf flowers. He called it the LV monogram. It was revolutionary. It was the first time a designer's logo became the main feature of the product. The LV monogram stopped the counterfeiters for a time and turned the bags into instant, recognizable status symbols. The unpickable lock. Georges also solved another problem for the wealthy: theft. Aristocrats traveled with expensive jewelry in their trunks. Georges and his father had invented a brilliant, unpickable spring buckle lock system. Georges was so confident in his invention that he publicly challenged the famous escape artist Harry Houdini to try and break out of a locked Louis Vuitton trunk. Houdini never accepted the challenge, which only made the brand look stronger. By the 1930s, Georges Vuitton passed away, leaving the company to his son, Gaston Louis Vuitton. Gaston faced the hardest era in modern history. The Great Depression wiped out global wealth, and then World War II erupted. In 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied France. Most luxury brands in Paris shut their doors. Chanel closed, many designers fled, but Louis Vuitton stayed open. This is the darkest and most controversial chapter in the company's history. To survive the occupation, the Louis Vuitton company collaborated with the Vichy regime, the French government, that worked with the Nazis. They built busts of the controversial leader Philippe Pétain and produced items for government officials. For decades, the brand kept this history buried. It wasn't until a French journalist uncovered the truth years later that the world learned the dark compromises the family made to keep the business alive. When the war finally ended, Gaston Louis had to scrub the brand's tarnished image and adapt to a completely new world. From trunks to handbags. In the 1950s, people weren't traveling by steamship with massive trunks anymore. They were driving cars and flying on commercial airplanes. Gaston realized the company had to pivot or die. He shifted the focus from massive wooden trunks to flexible leather goods and handbags. This era birthed some of the most iconic bags in fashion history. The Speedy bag, a chic everyday handbag made famous by Audrey Hepburn. The Keepall, a lightweight modern duffel bag for weekend trips. The Noé, originally designed to carry exactly 5 bottles of expensive champagne for wealthy clients. Louis Vuitton officially transitioned from a luggage company into a high-fashion titan. By the 1970s, Louis Vuitton was highly respected, but it was still a relatively small, family-run business with only 2 standalone stores. Enter Henri Racamier, Gaston's son-in-law. Racamier wasn't a designer. He was a ruthless, brilliant businessman. He looked at Louis Vuitton and saw a sleeping giant. Racamier executed a master plan to turn the brand into a money-printing machine. Global expansion. He opened massive, glamorous boutiques in New York, Tokyo, and the Middle East. Vertical integration. He stopped selling through third-party retailers. If you wanted an LV bag, you had to buy it directly from an LV store. This allowed them to control the price and the luxury experience. But Racamier's biggest move came in 1987. He merged Louis Vuitton with 2 other luxury giants, Moët and Chandon, the world's premier champagne and Hennessy, the finest cognac. Together, they formed LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. It was the birth of the ultimate luxury conglomerate, the wolf in cashmere. However, Racamier made a fatal mistake. During corporate disputes, he invited a young, aggressive property developer named Bernard Arnault to invest in the company to help him keep control. Bernard Arnault was a shark. Instead of helping Racamier, Arnault secretly bought up a majority of the company's stock behind his back. In a vicious, dramatic boardroom coup, in 1989, Arnault ousted Racamier and took total control of LVMH. It was a hostile takeover that shocked the business world. Under Bernard Arnault's iron-fisted leadership, LVMH became an unstoppable empire. He didn't just stop at Louis Vuitton. He bought Christian Dior, Givenchy, Fendi, Bulgari, and Tiffany & Co. He transformed Louis Vuitton's product lines, bringing in superstar designers like Marc Jacobs and Virgil Abloh to merge streetwear with ultra-luxury. Today, LVMH is worth over $500 billion. Bernard Arnault frequently trades places with Elon Musk as the richest man on planet Earth, boasting a net worth of over $200 billion. Louis Vuitton is no longer just trying to sell bags. They sell an entirely exclusive lifestyle. They cater to the top 1% of the world. Crocodile and python bags. Handcrafted from exotic skins, these bags easily sell for $50,000 to $100,000. Custom orders. Need a monogrammed travel case specifically designed to hold your diamond watches on your private yacht? They will build it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. To maintain this absolute exclusivity, Louis Vuitton does something completely shocking. They never put their products on sale. If a product doesn't sell at the end of the year, they don't discount it. According to industry insiders, they literally burn or destroy the unsold merchandise. Why? Because if anyone can buy a cheap Louis Vuitton bag, it destroys the illusion of wealth. It has been over 170 years since a starving, homeless boy walked into Paris with nothing but the clothes on his back. Today, the LV logo is universally recognized across the globe. It is the ultimate status symbol, representing wealth, power, and flawless craftsmanship. But beneath the diamonds, the billionaires, and the runway models, the true soul of Louis Vuitton remains rooted in the dirt roads of 19th century France. It is a profound reminder that greatness does not require a wealthy starting point. It requires unshakable resilience. Louis Vuitton's story teaches us that when life breaks you down, you have two choices. You can surrender to your circumstances, or you can start walking. He chose to walk, and in doing so, he built an empire that outlasted wars, outlasted poverty, and changed the world forever.